In this video, we'll take a look at some more complicated things that we can do with parameters in Houdini on our OTLs. So currently, if we want to move our control points around, the only option that we really have is to use our value ladder here, which isn't so bad, but it'd be nice if we could just control it from the viewport directly. So the way that we do that is if we right click on our OTL and go to type properties, and then what we want to create is something called a handle. So if we go to the handles tab, and then where it says create handle, it's a drop down menu. So this is most but not all of the different types of handles that you can have in Houdini. What we want is a transformer. So the transformer handle basically is the handle that lets you handle translate, rotate, scale, stuff like that. Okay, so the way this works is if you look over here on the right, when you have a handle selected, you'll see all of these different bindings. And these bindings correspond to different types of handles. So if we have tx, ty, tz, that's for translate, sx, sy, sz is for scale, rx, ry, rz is for rotate. So what we want to do is just let people move our control point around with the handle. So that would be translate. So let's just do txyz. So the way this works is you're binding the part of the handle to an actual parameter on the interface. So in this case, what we want to do is we want to make the translate part of the handle change the position parameter, so that when they move the handle around, it'll actually change the values in this position parameter. So the way that we do that is we just put the parameter name that we want to bind to in the corresponding field for the handle. So if we click in here and we type position x, it'll change the x component here. And if we click in here and say position y, it'll change the y component, and position z. So now if we hit apply, and actually I'm just going to hit accept to get rid of the dialog. If we grab one of these control points and put our cursor in the viewport, hit enter, you'll notice that this lovely little handle comes up. And now I can just move the control point around. Say I want it there. Now the red one's there. And one thing I'd like you guys to notice is that when I move this handle around, notice that this parameter actually changes. So what's actually happening here? Well, as I move this handle around, it changes this parameter, which does exactly what it would do if I changed it in the value ladder. And since this parameter is still used to move the point inside the OTL, when I move this handle, it actually moves the point inside the OTL, which moves the control point that it sends into the attribute transfer inside the particle controller, which then changes the source for the particles. So the cool thing about this is that users can actually just work entirely from the viewport. So if I wanted to, we could actually even get rid of these by just maximizing our viewport. And all of a sudden we can just move this around, and we have this giant viewport screen that allows us to see everything that's going on. Now, the kind of funny thing about this though is that we can move it around, but we can't actually control the intensity, which is something that we probably should be able to do from the viewport. So if we unmaximize the viewport and we right click on our control point and go back to type properties, let's look at how to add parameters to the viewport interface. So if we go to our parameters tab, let's say that we want to change explosion intensity. If we click on that, so where it says show parm in, and then it says main dialog only by default, what that means is that it's only going to show the parameter in this parameter pane. So if we pull that down and say main and tool dialogs plus toolbox, the toolbox that it's talking about is actually up here. So if we hit apply, or accept rather, now explosion intensity is up here. And the cool thing about this is that if I maximize the viewport again, it's still there. As long as I'm in selection mode, and as long as I'm in the selection mode for that OTL, it'll actually put this parameter up here. And now, say when I hit play, I notice that this is really intense. Maybe I just set this to 8. And now it's less intense. Maybe even set it to like 2. There we go. Maybe like 5. There we go. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the other things that we can do with parameters. So if we just unmaximize the viewport real fast. Now, as we add more and more parameters to our OTL interfaces, it starts to get really cluttered, because we could end up having a really long list of parameters here. And it could actually be really helpful to be able to organize them a little bit better. So if we go back to our friend the type properties dialog, what we can do is we can add folders. And folders are basically tabs on the interface. So if we add a folder real fast, just by dragging it over from the left to the right here. Now if I just hit apply right away, you can see that there's this folder name here, and there's no actual parameters inside it. So what happens if we just add another folder? So if we grab another folder and make sure that you put it right underneath the first folder, so there should be 2 folders right next to each other. And now if we hit apply, you'll notice that we have 2 different tabs here. So the way this works is all the folders that are right next to each other in the UI, or in this list, will be attached to each other as tabs. So if we take another folder and put it down at the very bottom and hit apply, you'll notice that it puts it underneath these guys, and it's not actually attached to these. Okay, the other thing that you'll notice is that as I switch back and forth between these, none of the parameters actually change. That's not really very helpful for organizing our interface. So let's go ahead and just delete the bottom folder here, and I'll hit apply so you can see what that did. And then why don't we just put the position and explosion intensity in one folder, and then the color parameters in another folder. So what we can do is take position and explosion intensity. I'm just shift clicking to select both of them. Click and drag and move them into the first folder. And then shift click to select both the enable color parameter and the color parameter, and drag that into the second folder. And now if we hit apply, you'll notice that the color parameters just disappeared, and now this folder seems to be containing these parameters. And actually if we go over to this other tab, now it contains the color parameters. So now all we have to do is name our folders. So if we take our folder and we just change the label, we can call this explosion settings, maybe. And then if we click on the second folder, we can just give it a label like color and hit apply. And now we have this nice, clear, organized layout.